Greetings, friends. Paul Thompson, and we are back with my good friend, cohort, partner in crime, Steve Autrey, the pastor at Denver United Methodist Church. We have such a good time doing these. I hope in some way that you get invited into the fun part of our conversation. But today we are going to dive into a pretty serious side to this story. We're going to talk about the beginning of this story and the nature of rebellion. And so, Steve.
And if I could, Paul, let me just read the verses that we'll be concentrating on this Sunday in our churches, which is Luke 15, verses 11 and through 14, I believe, correct?
Something like that.
11 through 13, actually, 11 through 13. And here it is. And, remember we've talked about how Scripture and the reading of Scripture is a means of grace. And so let us center our hearts around this story. Then Jesus said, there was a man who had two sons. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me. So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living.
Yeah, I sometimes think about me going into one of my parents, my dad, and saying, hey, I really can't wait for you to die. So could you mind just go ahead and let me have my portion of the inheritance today? Because I'm ready to leave. I don't want to be here anymore. Can't wait for you to die. Can you help a brother out?
Yeah.
I think about how well that would be going at my house. Can you imagine what that would be like at the Autrey house?
It would not go over well. And he'd probably say, I wasn't going to give you anything anyway.
Yeah. What made you think you were going to get
around a little bit? You're a father and a grandfather. How would you feel if one of your daughters were to walk into your house and say, hey, Dad, I'm done being around you. I'm really done being a part of this family. I know that you're going to leave me something someday. Why don't you just go ahead and give it to me so I can move on? And that's it. How would you feel?
One of the things that I've always, and I've said this to my parents, or especially to my mom, is I think we all need somebody that we kind of knows our person. We know doesn't matter what happens, they're on our side, and we have that person. But how hurtful would it be if, again, one of my daughters or a grandson walked in and said, Papa, we're just sick of you. We're sick of being here. All we really want you for is your money. We don't care a thing about you. We just really want the benefit of the money that we'll get. I can't imagine much more painful as a parent, grandparent than to feel so taken advantage of. That would be a bad feeling.
Well, and I think that's exactly what this is, a way of saying you're as good as dead to me. And we often miss that because we don't get the cultural shock this would have caused the original hearers. They would have known exactly what that meant. They would have known the inheritance laws, and they would have known the propriety that was supposed to accompany the way that children were, by the commandment of God, honor your parents.
And the law would have meant for the younger son, youngest of two sons, that he would have gotten a third rather than half. The law would have said the oldest child gets 2/3, the younger child gets 1/3. Again, he can't wait for that 1/3 to be given to him upon his father's death. So he asked for it ahead of time, and it's almost shocking that the father relents and says, "Yeah,
it is. That would have been one of the shock after shock, right? First, the son did what, and then the father complied. Yesterday, I asked folks to think about the word rebellion, and that's what's going on here, correct?
Well, we have been a rebellious people, and one of the stories that, or one of the ways that this story resonates, is it takes me all the way back to the garden, and then we can trace the story of rebellion in so many different ways. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve, at the serpent's kind of trickery, they rebel against God. We want to be our own God. We want to make our own decisions. You can then trace that story all the way down, Cain and Abel. You can go down through the story of Noah. And then especially in the stories of Moses. Moses has a brother and a sister, Aaron and Miriam. they conspire against God's man Moses. There are ongoing stories. If you remember the story of Absalom, the son of David, who conspired against his father in the kingdom. It's not as if this is an isolated story in Luke chapter 15. Man, we've seen rebellion throughout the scriptures.
And what do you think what about our makeup, our humanity leads us to be, well, really self-centered? And,
Steve,
I mean, isn't that what there's part of that in this? The kid, the younger son he's all about himself. And
well, I think we are in a culture that is particularly right now wrestling with authority. Who can tell me what to do? And that seems to be the case always has been from the biblical story and still is today. We struggle. Who gets to tell me what to do? Nobody gets to tell me what to do.
And I think here's an opportunity to, we both as United Methodist ministers, clergy, elders, we have taken vows to submit to the authority of our bishop, and to be faithful to a book of discipline that tells us what we can and can't do.
And if we can't find our way to do that, we should go do something different or somewhere else.
And it occurs to me that, well, don't mean to shut you out there, but it just occurs to me, and in that moment, that it's got to seem really strange to people to think that someone can tell us where to live.
Yeah.
And they can tell us, I mean, either one of us could get a call tomorrow and saying, it would be highly irregular, but we could get that call saying, from our new bishop, Bishop Carter, saying, hey, I need you wherever. I expect you to wrap up things where you are and be on your way.
One of the questions they ask us at ordination, will you go where you were sent? And I nodded yes. I didn't say it out loud just in case. And Steve, I think this debate going on right now around, mass mandates and vaccines and all of that, Romans 13:1, that first part of Romans chapter 13, encourages us and says to us that we are to obey the authorities, that God is putting them into positions of authority just for the purpose of making life better. Now, I don't like wearing a mask. I hate wearing a mask. I recognize that some people would have real problems taking a vaccine, but I think we also have to look at everything from a theological perspective. And the theological perspective is that governments, bishops, other people are put into positions of authority to rein in our natural act of rebellion. We, at our heart and core, typically are people of rebellion, and we need people to help us with that.
And it's hard, right? And again, all your cards, letters, notes can go to Paul Thompson, but it is a fascinating thing to think about. What is at the heart of rebellion? Why do we not want to be told what to do, even by God?
Proverbs 17:11 is a proverb that says, "An evil man seeks only rebellion, and a cruel messenger will be sent against him." The Proverbs often I have a hard time with the Proverbs because they're these little sayings that sometimes seem to annoy rather than instruct. But here we have that sense at which, when you have a rebellious spirit, when you automatically rebel against authority of any kind, then boy, you really are setting yourself up for major problems. And we have often in our human condition this real sense of rebelliousness, not only against God, against each other, against governments, against parents. And man, how do we learn to navigate this rebellious spirit?
I think part of our struggle is understanding that God intends good for us, and that Christ really, in his teaching and in the message of Scripture, really does know what is best for us. My guess is the Father knew what was best for the Son here. I remember I think I was 19, 20 years old. My dad and I had a bit of a dispute around something that he knew what was best for me. And I thought I knew what was best for me. And I didn't take his advice. And I can say that it didn't work out as well as I'd hoped it would. But, that's part of that struggle, is wanting to be, at the heart of, in Genesis, of that rebellion, is wanting to in some ways, be your own God. I want to be God for myself.
Yeah.
I want to be autonomous. I want to be, and the hard thing is there's some real things that we would say are good about wanting to be strong, about seeking to be independent. I've got 2 teenage daughters. I hope someday they learn independence. I want to foster that, but there's a difference in being helping taking care of yourself and being truly integrated in a larger community. Yeah. We have to listen to God, and that's hard for us sometimes to listen. We can be as hard-headed as a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, and that's the image we get here in this scripture.
So as we close out this video podcast for today, I invite you tomorrow, as we set up the conversation heading into Sunday morning, to think about rebellion from your standpoint. Maybe a story comes to you about a time, kind of maybe something like a story Steve was talking about with his father. And we'll come back and revisit this tomorrow. We sure look forward to seeing you then, and we're so grateful, as always, for your time and attention.
Thank you.
You have a good night.